Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And the 2044 season is underway. Unfortunately, we lost on opening day 4-1. Didn't get a vintage performance from Jim Lance in his first opportunity to be the opening day starter for the Buffalo Wings franchise, but hopefully he will have many future opening day starts in the coming years. Still have high expectations for the team this year despite losing that first game. It is a win-now team, but it's also a team in transition. As we talked about at the start of the last episode, our longtime ace, Alexis Barajas, our first baseman, Daniel Rojas, and our future Hall of Famer, Deshaun Seifu, could all be in their final years with Buffalo this year. So we are in a win-now mode. But we're also in a situation where we made some trades in this offseason to bolster our farm system. And before we get the season underway, just want to let you know what we're thinking about the two gems that we brought on board. I guess one could be considered a gem in Jim Reichert. The other one may be a little bit of a diamond in the rough. But Reichert, we're going to start out in Double-A Utica, and you look at his profile, and he is certainly capable of playing in the majors at this point. But with an outfield of Coma Duran, Velasco, Porter, Canales, and Boston, we don't really have an obvious spot on the 26-man roster for him this season. So I think my plan is to try to maximize his development in the minors this year. Start him out in Double-A for the first couple months, move him to Triple-A for a couple of months, and then he will almost certainly be a September call-up. Assuming we make the postseason, he'll be on the postseason roster. And I think he'll likely be a very strong candidate to even be in the starting lineup if and when we get to the postseason. So the goal for him is to just maximize the development. And even though he was in Triple-A last year with the Dodgers organization, and he did a great job there, we're starting him in Double-A primarily for a strategic reason as far as his development. You look at our Double-A hitting coach, Trevor White. And we expect him to have an excellent relationship with Reichert. And Trevor White is also outstanding at both handling development and influencing mechanics. So we think that that's probably the best opportunity in our organization to really give his development a boost over the next couple of months. As I said, after that, we'll move him up to AAA and would expect to see him in the majors before the end of the year. We are also going to, once we have him fully trained up to play left field, try to train him at right field. He is 6'2". When I look at these ratings, though, 35 range, 30 error, 45 arm, and 20 turn 2 as an infielder. I'm thinking he's probably a 40 max as far as his position rating as a first baseman. So I don't know that he's someone we want to play there every day. I think in a perfect world, Reichert might be our designated hitter down the line. So we'll be following his development pretty closely. And although there's not an easy roster spot for him this year, and that's not even fair to say it that way, because if we really wanted him up there, he would clearly be up there with his bat. But we'll try to get the best of both worlds by really focusing on his development over the next few months and then potentially still having him for the playoffs if we need. But next year, with the potential departure of Rojas, with the potential retirement and or us declining the option on Seifu, and with the fact that the outfielder Josh Porter likely to be a free agent as well, not going to be a problem at all to get Reichert onto the 26-man roster next season without having to perhaps waive and DFA someone we don't want to. So that's the plan with him for the coming months. Turning now to the player who's more of a project, Josh, the Clarksville Fox Fuchs. We're going to start him back in single A. He was in A with the Yankees organization last year and was not particularly effective. You look at his ratings relative to the Carolina League, and it looks like he should be able to have a pretty solid season this year. Don't expect him to be in single A the entire year. We will probably promote him in a couple of months up to the Sally League, where he might struggle a little more. I think he'd be fine there if we started him there now, but want him to have some success as the season begins, maybe boost his ratings a little bit. It's even conceivable that we'll have him up in Double A right at the end of the year after the high A season ends. Looking at his relationships with the hitting coaches and the managers at the various levels, there's some really good matches. There's some that are less favorable, at least as far as the relationships that he'll have with them. But think that kind of diversifying throughout our system and moving him up slowly is probably the way to get him where we want him to be, which hopefully is a call up in September of 2045, and then our starting shortstop for opening day 2046. But he's got a lot more work to do than Mr. Reichert to be a full-time major leaguer. But we think with the good coaching we have, with the good personality of Fuchs, particularly the high work ethic as well as the adaptability and the leadership, and the fact that we have boosted our player development budget up to $40 million this coming year, that we should be in a pretty good position to maximize the development of both of those players as well as the rest of our farm system. And two final quick things before we start moving forward in the season. Some of you like to wonder what we're doing on the waiver wire, and I don't typically get into it in the episodes unless we find something interesting, but just for your edification, I did look at the waiver wire several days ago, right when camps ended and final roster decisions were made, and I've looked at it again today and over the last couple of days of game time, and nothing particularly interesting from my perspective to do there. So we haven't done anything on the waiver wire. And the draft will be happening in about 2.5 months. It's going to be kind of an interesting year for us. There's a ton of compensatory picks in the relatively early to mid stages of the first round that are out there. So our first and only first round pick is going to be number 40 overall this year. So not necessarily going to even get the same caliber of player that we've gotten in recent years when we've typically had our first pick in the late 20s and early 30s, but it is what it is, and we'll find out who's available in a few months. And the final thing to mention before we start simming forward, Sean Drawn, the left-handed reliever recovering from a torn rotator cuff, still going to be injured for another 6 weeks or so before he can begin a rehab assignment. So hopefully we'll see him back in the majors before the All-Star break. No guarantees what he's going to look like coming off of that pretty significant injury as a soon-to-be 35-year-old. But right now we only have 2 lefties in our bullpen and none in our rotation. So his hopeful eventual return from this injury is something that we'll be following closely. And our Buffalo Wings are off to a relatively mediocre start through the first couple weeks of the season, 6-7 record here on April 18th. Just found out that Brenton Burrill, who was, of course, the centerpiece of that trade for Reichert, suffered a ruptured MCL and is going to miss the entire year. Given that he's going to be turning 24 in less than a month, really question his ultimate development at this point. The low work ethic and adaptability, I think, have worked against his development a bit, which was one of our concerns. Did have 2 homers and 3 ribbies and 19 at-bats. but those 2 homers were his only hits. And he'll be coming back next spring as a 24-year-old who's never been above A ball. So certainly no guarantees that the same injury would have happened if he had been in our organization, but feeling like it was probably the right decision to move on from him. Now it's just a matter of developing Reichert to reach his maximum potential. And our Wings are still struggling here, 8-11 record on April 24th. The pitching just hasn't been as good as it usually is. Do think that that will normalize over time. Just lost the outfielder Josh Porter to a fractured finger for 6 weeks. Thought briefly about bringing Reichert up, but going to stick to the plan as far as Reichert's concerned. And we did, right when the season started, signed Spencer Nivens to a minor league contract. He is the 42-year-old longtime major league veteran who at this point is just 38 hits away from 3,000. So we're going to promote him to the major league team. I don't think he's going to play regularly enough to get his 38 hits before Porter comes back, and we'll have to make a decision on him. But we'll try to help him get there. Would be kind of cool if a year after Deshaun Seifu got his 3,000th hit, we had another player in the Buffalo Wings uniform joining that prestigious club. And we've made it to the end of April, played a little better over our last few games, although we did lose our final game of the month, 11-13 record. So hopefully we'll be getting back over 500 soon. Not shockingly, when we look at our development report for the month of April, a lot of older players who are bolstering our minor league system are moving in the wrong direction. You can see Nivens at the major league level is moving the wrong way. He has only played in 1 game in the 4 or 5 days that he's been up with us. Doesn't even have an at-bat yet, so unlikely he's going to get 3,000 with us unless we have some more significant injuries. I mentioned that the slow start to the season, largely attributable to our pitching, and you can kind of see why here. A month into the season, and we've gotten only 3 wins from our starters, 1 from Lance and 2 from Barajas. Our 3, 4, and 5 starters, Barbarito, Lott, and Manelli, combined 0-8 with ERAs in the high 4s and 5s. Think that that will likely improve. These are still pretty talented pitchers who, particularly in the case of Barbarito, but even in the case of Lott and Manelli, are somewhat proven entities at the major league level at this point. The bullpen, with the exception of Chris Powers, and admittedly it's a tiny sample size of 5 2/3 innings, is doing its typical excellent work this year. So no real concerns there, and I do expect that our starting pitching will fix itself as time goes on. Check in on a couple of key offensive players. Deshaun Seifu, you can see he's in a slump now, and batting average just 204 this year, season after hitting 304. Does have 8 steals, 4 doubles, and 2 triples, so despite his advanced age, still can leg out an extra base hit time to time. But that 49 WRC plus and negative 0.6 WAR are both pretty sickly numbers, particularly for a player who's had his career. We're going to give him at least another month as our leadoff hitter. If he's still struggling to stay over the Mendoza line when the calendar turns to June, it may be time to move Mr. Seifu into more of a part-time role, but not ready to make that decision quite yet after only 24 games following a season when he did hit over 300 and get the 3,000th hit in his career. Tim Boston, in contrast, the new addition, has been hot, hitting 309, 6 homers and 16 ribbies, one of our stronger offensive players with a 173 WRC plus through the first month of the season. And then Luis Comaduran has been a big disappointment after he signed that big contract with us, 4 years with a player option for the final season. He, as we talked about, has been, until this year, a 130 WRC plus player for us through his time in Buffalo, but really struggling to live up, I guess, to the expectations of that big contract, hitting just a $150 with only one ribby through his first 20 games of the season. And this is a guy who's batting right in the middle of our lineup. So some less than optimal pitching from the back end, particularly of our rotation, and one of the big bats on our team really struggling. Probably the two key explanations for why we're a couple games below 500 as of the end of the month of April. And we probably won't check in on the minor leaguers every month, but because I know Riker and Fuchs are top of mind for myself as well as some viewers, we'll see what they're doing so far. Riker, kind of a slow start in Double-A for him. Well, a slow start in terms of the 240 batting average, but he still does have 7 homers and 13 ribbies, and he's put up a 161 WRC plus. So hard to call that a poor start, but certainly would expect him to be hitting more than 240 in Utica. He's probably only going to be there for another month or so. We'll get an updated scouting report from him in a few weeks, see if maybe he's made a little progress with that contact in home run power and eye, given the excellent coaching and excellent relationship he's going to have with our hitting coach there. And if he's made a little progress, probably will be promoting him to AAA relatively soon. Checking in on Josh Fuchs. The extra time in Class A ball seems to be working out well for him. He's much more productive there this year with a 155 WRC plus. Got the batting average up 40 points, 5 homers, and 71 at-bats. So good to see him getting more productive. The big thing we're going to be following with Fuchs in the coming years is hopefully him getting that avoid strikeout rating up to at least the 40. Would love it if there was a little hidden development that we're able to find, or we can make some improvements to his swing in the minors to get the ceiling even higher than a 40. But if he can get that avoid strikeouts to a 40 and realize most of the other potential that we think he has, I think that'll be a pretty useful bat with an excellent glove, which could be an interesting shortstop for us. Juan Toledo, who's now the second best prospect in our system, having a better year also in his first full-time go-round in A-ball, hitting 292 with 3 homers and 72 at-bats. He'll likely be in line for a promotion in the not-so-distant future as well. And we're still struggling to be a 500 team as we get near the end of May. Josh Porter, we had him spend a couple days at a rehab assignment in Albany, I guess 3 days technically, and he's ready to come back now. And that means we'll be parting ways with Spencer Nivens. Played only 3 games for us over the 6 weeks that he was up and only 1 at-bat. He did have a hit in that 1 at-bat to his credit, but clearly he's not going to be getting enough playing time with us to make a serious run at 3,000. We will try to send him down to Albany. He refuses to be demoted, not surprisingly. So in that case, we will go ahead and release Mr. Nivens to make space for the roster on Mr. Porter. And we won our last 2 games in the month of May, so we've gotten back to 500. Been a long struggle to get there, but we're 26 and 26 as the month of June begins. Taking a look at the standings, 7 games out in the National League East division. We thought we'd be in strong competition to win this year, so that is certainly not great. And we're 2.5 behind in the race for a wild card spot, and several teams that we'd have to jump over to even get into the 4th wild card spot. So the season definitely not going as we had hoped thus far. Can see not anyone except for Joe Scott, our reliever, who has a 1.7 pitcher WAR. He's only one on the team on the leaderboard. Kind of interesting for a closer to be in that type of position. Pitched 23 games, 36 strikeouts in 27 and a third innings, 16 saves with a 1-2 record, 175 ERA plus, and an absolute ridiculous 38 FIP minus have led him to that 2.12 SIERA and that 1.7 WAR. Certainly wouldn't expect him to be among the pitching WAR leaders by the end of the season unless he has just a remarkable season as a reliever. But it's good that we're back to 500, but it's certainly not good that we're only at 500 2 months into the season with a decent sample size of 52 games, so almost a third of the way to think about at this point. We'll take a look at our statistics. Pythagorean record should be a game better than where we are right now. And after a losing record in the month of April, we were 2 games over 500 in the month of May, so that's positive as well. The offense is the problem. The pitching has normalized, but we rank 14th in the National League in runs scored, and you can see we're in the bottom half of the league in a lot of categories. 10th in batting average, 10th in slugging, 10th in OPS, 13th in hits, 12th in extra base hits, 15th in home runs. So a pretty sickly performance by the offense thus far is certainly not helping matters. The pitching, as I noted, has started to normalize back towards the excellent pitching staff that we're used to in Buffalo. Ranked second in the National League in runs allowed. Our starters ERA is second, bullpen ERA is fourth, and you can see we're in the top handful of every pitching category except for BABIP, where we rank 10th right now. Respectable defense, respectable on the base paths. The question is going to be whether this hitting eventually breaks out. I like our lineup overall. Seifu is the guy who is probably the most logical demotion to think about. Coma Duran has turned things around a bit. 14 ribbies in the month of May is at least respectable, although only 1 home run on the year is certainly not what we were expecting from him. But just looking at his batting ratings, he's not a guy that we could realistically think about taking out of the lineup. But Seifu hitting just 207 2 months into the season, looking at the batting ratings that he has, it may finally be time for a demotion for Mr. Seifu. He's better against left-handed pitching, at least in terms of the ratings, than he is against right-handed pitching. And I think we are going to make the difficult decision here on June 1st to take Deshaun Seifu out of the lineup against right-handed pitching. Find a hopefully more productive designated hitter, likely move Velasco into the leadoff role. This is going to be the first time since Seifu came up for good in about June or July of 2027 that he is not the everyday leadoff hitter for the Buffalo Wings, but can't ignore that he's got a 57 WRC plus. He's been below replacement level, and his ratings just suggest that he's a borderline roster player for us. Take a look and see if there is a significant difference between righties and lefties, and really there isn't. He's hitting 207 against righties and 208 against lefties. That said, his on-base percentage is definitely better against left-handed pitching. His OPS a little bit better, and his WRC plus is a 72 as opposed to a 49. So could just take him out of the lineup entirely, but for the time being, I think Mr. Seifu is headed to the bench against right-handed hitting only days before his 40th birthday. And a difficult conversation with one man, like we've had with Deshaun Seifu, is an opportunity for another one. The young left-handed hitting outfielder Edgar Canales, not doing that well for us this year, but part of it is because he's only been playing against left-handed pitching, which is not really ideal. He's going to get an opportunity to play every day now. He's going to become our right fielder, number 2 hitter against right-handed pitching. I think that his splits certainly suggest that he should be more effective than Seifu in the lineup at this point. And that'll allow us to move Tim Boston to a DH role. Hopefully that will help jumpstart the offense a bit. But after Deshaun Seifu has really never suffered any significant injury, he can see the fewest games he's ever started in a season since he became a full-time starter is 147, and he's played 150 plus games every year. So when he came up in 2027, almost exactly 17 years ago, for the second half of the season, he's been our leadoff hitter pretty much every day for the last 17 years. And that will no longer be the case for Mr. Seifu. And it could be completely coincidental, but perhaps a bit sadly, getting Deshaun Seifu out of the leadoff spot has really rejuvenated this offense. We're 32-27 here on June 9th, only 3.5 back in the division. So we have been playing clearly our best ball of the year since we moved on from Mr. Seifu. We've won 5 out of 6 games since the beginning of the month, and 6 out of 7 overall during the month of June. Could just be a small sample size, but clearly he wasn't getting the job done as a leadoff hitter for us. We've now got another interesting decision to make with Sean Drawn. He's finished up that rehab assignment in Albany. The numbers aren't bad. A 3 ERA over 12 innings with a 1 whip, but we have rescouted him. And you can see his stuff is not quite major league average anymore. He's really a borderline pitcher for us. I think we're probably inclined to waive and DFA him rather than give him a roster spot. He's out of minor league options, so there's no choices there. But Nate Ruckel is clearly not going to lose his spot as a lefty, and Joe Warner has done a pretty good job for us this year at the majors, more than a pretty good job as far as the numbers, with a 1.41 ERA, but you can see the 3.45 SIERA, so he's perhaps been a bit lucky with that 244 BABIP against him. But his profile looks better than Drawn's at this point as well. Chris Powers hasn't been performing incredibly well for us this year. He does have option years left, but I look at Powers' profile, and even though he has option years left, I think I'd rather keep him on the major league roster at this point. And don't see any need for Mike Roberts, who I think still has options. Yeah, 1 option year left for him, but he's performing well enough. And when I look at his profile, doesn't make sense to me to move on from him either. So Drawn, it seems like that injury has impacted his quality. And he's 35 years old. He's only throwing in the low 90s at this point. I think we will need to add another lefty and another high-quality lefty to the bullpen at some point in the coming couple of months before the trade deadline. But I don't really think that Drawn is the answer anymore, so we're going to waive and DFA him if someone happens to pick him up. Good luck to him. If he makes it to AAA Albany and he can spend some more time there, that would be fine as well. At least he'd give us another left-handed option. And the good news is that Drawn has cleared waivers. The bad news is he won't accept an assignment to Albany. So rather than releasing him and being responsible for all the rest of his contract this year, not that it's a huge amount of money, we're going to at least see whether there might be any trade option for him where we can get a minor leaguer back in return. Now, it's kind of weird if someone would offer us something that they wouldn't have just picked him up for free, but that's one of the quirks of the game. Actually, looks like in this situation, the only guys that were being offered for him are guys with bigger. Oh, no, there's one guy down at the bottom of the list. That was all guys with bigger contracts or the same contract as him that's guaranteed. Looks like the Nationals organization will offer us Ernie Holt for him, though. Right-handed pitcher, not a big-time pitcher. But it means we will at least save about half of Drawn's salary, given that it's June 16th. Every penny we can save will matter as we look to hopefully add a higher quality left-handed pitcher in the trade market down the line. So we're going to go ahead and deal Mr. Drawn away to the Nationals organization. And we've made it to the first-year player draft here. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, we're not going to be picking till number 40, so very likely that none of these top prospects will be around when we are on the board. As we sit here on the first day of summer, though, the team has been playing much better here in the month of June. 38-31 record, just 3 games back in the division at this point. And we are into a wild card spot, 2 games up on the Padres for the final wild card spot if the season were to end today. So definitely things have been going better. You can see we're still 1 game below Pythagorean expectations, but we're 12-5 here in the month of June. Up to tied for 11th in runs scored. Sadly, that is some progress since we checked in 3 weeks ago. And back to our familiar perch, first in the National League in runs allowed, which is where we've spent most of the past decade plus. So things are going better. Feel bad that it had to be at the expense of Mr. Seifu. Take a look at his batting splits to see what he's done here in the month of June. And he's 3 for 13. Hitting .231, playing a lot more sporadically just against left-handed pitching. Still does have 17 stolen bases on the year with just 3 caught stealings. I believe he's leading our team in stolen bases. So not necessarily the way we wanted his career to end, but I think we're getting to the end with Mr. Seifu. As I talked about, we do have a team option for him at $6 million next year. He's not willing to waive his no-trade clause, so he's not going anywhere for the rest of this season. We're not going to waive and DFA him. We're okay using a 26-man roster spot for him. But he's not going to be getting a ton of playing time going forward unless we have some injuries or his performance changes markedly. So kind of a slow finish to his career. I imagine there's almost no probability that we exercise. There's no probability that we exercise that team option at $6 million for next year. Looking at his performance and looking at his ratings and where they are right now, could I sentimentally be inclined to bring him back for another year at $1.5 million if he doesn't retire? Perhaps. My hope is that he will just retire at the end of this year now that he's 40 years old, and given that he is a member of the 3,000 hit club, he's still about 136 stolen bases away from Rickey Henderson, so he's not going to catch him for number 1 all-time there, but hopefully he can at least keep his career batting average 290 or higher with whatever playing time he gets the rest of this year. We'll see whether we've gotten a spark, perhaps, from the move that we made, given more playing time to Edgar Canales. And Not particularly. He's only hitting 217, so he's playing more. Does have 6 doubles and a triple. So still may need to look for a different answer there at the top of the batting order, but felt like Canales is a 26-year-old who's really kind of been a bench player for us, or based on the composition of our team, he's typically been a lefty who's occasionally been starting against lefties, which I admit is odd, but want to at least give him an opportunity to play every day for a little while against right-handed pitching, because certainly when we look at his profile, he looks like he could be a pretty interesting player for us, particularly against right-handed pitching. So we're going to continue to give him some opportunities going forward. And with that, we will turn our attention to the draft. Before we finish up the episode, we'll auto draft until our pick. Take a look, as we often do, at some of the top players who are around. And you can see here, picking at number 40, there's only 3 everyday players that we think are... Actually, I'll go back to my usual view. There's only 3 everyday players that we think have higher than 3-star potential. We'll check in on some of the top pitchers as well. Dan Glazewski, impossible to sign, so he must have a crazy demand. The left-handed hitting right fielder looks like a pretty interesting potential bat. Do like the high work ethic, not a lot of speed, pretty average defensively. Signability is supposedly impossible. The one thing that we do have going for us this year is that we've got a little bit of money available at this point. Probably not quite enough to bring him on board, since we've only got a small amount budgeted. I think only about $6 million. Yeah, $6 million in the draft budget. So probably borderline that we've got enough to bring him on board, but we could certainly tweak our scouting and player development down a bit. As I've talked about, I think we do need to add a high-quality left-handed arm at some point. So I don't think we want to use all of this money on draftees, but he's certainly one for us to consider depending on how the other players look. I'm guessing, just based on what our scout thinks, that we're going to think he's got the highest ceiling of any of the players available here in the draft. Jared Wynand, a 18-year-old first baseman, kind of a typical first baseman profile, decent home run power, decent eye, durable, no speed, no defensive skill to speak of. And Danny Salt, an 18-year-old catcher, pretty average defensively, looks like a interesting-ish bat for a catcher, and durable as far as his injury proneness. Pretty uninspiring options, quite honestly. As I mentioned, there's a lot of 3-star guys out there that we'll spend some time looking at offline. I'll highlight the college guys, since those might be closer to being able to help us. Shortstop J.D. Pendergraft, 20-year-old. Looks kind of similar-ish to a lot of the infielders we have right now. A guy you'd really like to have is a utility infielder. Probably would prefer not to be playing him every day. Greg Henderson, a left fielder out of New Haven, for a corner outfielder. Not all that exciting of a profile to me. Jabari Cumberlander out of Felican University. Not the worst prospect in the world. He's durable, got some positive personality traits, 65 range, looks like a borderline useful bat. I honestly don't hate him, don't love that he's only faced a fair level of competition at Felican University, but might be one to consider. And then center fielder Eric Churchman, committed to Notre Dame. Actually, he's a high school player. He's just further along than your typical high school player. Durable, don't love the low work ethic, does have some speed, decent outfield range. Looks like a contact hitter, but unfortunately a contact hitter who's not going to draw a ton of walks. Turning our attention now to the pitchers, And there's actually a more robust crop of pitchers. We've got a whole page of guys that we think have 3.5-star potential or higher. Given my proclivity towards pitchers, this might be a direction that we end up going, especially with all the trades we did this offseason that led us to trade away some of our farm system pitching depth for the bats that we've already talked about. Bo Teal, 18-year-old. Looks like he could definitely have a 4-pitch arsenal when all is said and done. Potentially really good stuff. Good movement, control a potential issue. Not great at holding on runners. Decent prospect. Made to win Cook. Looks like a 3-pitch arsenal. Durable, so enough to be a starter. Doesn't look like a completely uninteresting profile from him. If that slider really develops to a 70 with a good fastball and a good sinker, he could be a pretty interesting pitcher. Dan Clements, a closer. Probably not the direction we'd go, given we got some concerns about his movement. 22-year-old out of Belmont. Throws pretty hard, not too far from being able to help in the majors. Devin Buffa, starting pitcher who's likely a reliever, given that mediocre potential changeup that he has as a third pitch. Probably not the direction we'll end up going. And then there's also 4 4-star prospects. Zach Pruski, 18-year-old. That slider comes along, he's kind of interesting. He's got high work ethic. He's durable, good stamina, good at holding runners. I think that his stuff, movement, and control could all be average, above average to well above average. Committed to Nebraska, left-hander. Pruski's interesting to me. Caleb Kreveling, another starting pitching prospect, also durable, high work ethic, right-hander, committed to Vanderbilt, so you know that he's viewed as a very high-end high school prospect. Going to need the curve and the changeup, at least one of them to develop, preferably the curve, which we think is his highest-end pitch. Interesting that he's got an arsenal with 5 pitches, none of which are potentially a fastball, but his slider, curve, change, sinker, splitter combo could be pretty good if it all develops. Barracuda Kreveling is also interesting. Arian Bird, another durable guy, right-handed pitcher, going to be, he's got 3 pitches potentially without the changeup, but we think that changeup is his highest ceiling pitch. If that changeup develops, his stuff is almost out of this world with movement and control that we think could be above average. He's already known as legend, even though he's only 18 years old. And last is the closer, Edgar Erguin, older player coming out of Maryland, lefty with a very good fastball and a very good slider. Question is his control. I don't think that's a direction that we would go with our first round pick, but a couple starters that I think are marginally interesting. Glazewski, I think is, or Glazewski, I think is the best everyday player available. That bat, 60 contact, 65 home run power, left-handed hitter is not a bad combination at all if it fully develops. But the amount of money he's looking for is probably going to be $12, $13, $14, $15 million. So it's going to require us with a maximum of $13 million right now to spend and 20 players to draft to get a little more creative and probably cut back on some of our investments in scouting and player development, and also limit our flexibility as far as a trade if we do bring him on board. So if you have thoughts on which direction we should go in this draft, always helpful for me to hear those in the comments section down below. Feel like the team is straightened out a bit with that 38-31 record here. Maybe completely coincidental, but it seems like getting Seifu out of an everyday role did kind of spark us to a better performance here in the month of June. So the end of an era for certain in Buffalo, and the hope is that at least Seifu will get to enjoy a 17th consecutive playoff appearance with us in October once this year is over. And as I noted, although we're only in the fourth wild card spot at this point, if the season were to end today, we'd be back in the playoffs. So can't really complain too much about how the season has gone. We'll see if we can add some talent in the draft in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.